I knew they wasn't gonna come and get me. I knew my phone wasn't gonna ring, but I still had to tell the people what I wanted. And that's the power of media right now.
Right.
We don't have to wait for a publishing in a newspaper or a magazine. I can go direct to the source.
Right.
Either with X, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram.
You got your own platform.
I got my own platform. I'm gonna tell you what I want.
Right.
And it's for you to sift through and say, okay, that juice is worth the squeeze.
Right.
And if not, then it is what it is.
Right.
And I'm fine with that. That's the thing that people don't understand.
So over the years, obviously, technology has improved tremendously. You have things such as AI, which can in a way manipulate what people say. I mean, heck, even besides that, we're pretty much talking to computers. Robots are running our lives right now. It's gotten to the point where you can literally go to a restaurant anywhere and talk to a robot and they'll bring your food to you. I mean, I'm pretty young myself. I'm not considered an OG or anything like that. But if you simply go to an elementary school, you don't even have kids writing anymore. Everything is typed. I even talked to a parent and they told me that they had to get their kids to start writing and they had to teach them themselves because in school, they're not even typing. They're talking to AI and AI is generating whatever they need to do and say. Honestly, that's ridiculous, but that's besides the point. But anyways, that's besides the point. As you guys see right here, we have Hall of Fame tight end Shannon Sharpe. He has an interview podcast called Club Shay Shay where he interviews different celebrities, ex-athletes, and other important people. Today he's interviewing former NFL MVP Cam Newton. Newton as well has his own podcast and his own platform on YouTube where he posts videos about how he feels about games, different events that go down, and he also has his own podcast where he interviews celebrities as well. Claudia Benavidez Espinosa as well as Amanda Willer Griffin were the authors of the article Social Media in Sports Theory and Practice, Journal of Sports Management had a good point. In this article, there was a study at a U.S. university. The study had examined 24 statements of purpose, known as SPs as well, submitted to a master's program in technical communication. What was interesting from this study is that they went off of logos, pathos, and ethos. Interviewing the students, they wanted to know how they use these through communication and which one was the most used. One that was most used and the one I see a lot throughout these podcasts was actually ethos. With ethos being the credibility that a speaker brings to the topic at hand, you tend to see that a lot in these podcasts. Flavor-wise, obviously with these podcasts, you're going to hear their personal credentials. You're also going to hear personal experience. And the main thing that a lot of people look at these days with the podcast, having the athletes doing the podcast, you have appeal to experts. Now, in this case, you have two NFL players, Cam Newton and Shannon Sharpe. Talking about football, they're appealing to experts. They bring up their personal credentials and personal experience. Now, there is something that Cam Newton said that you guys seen at the beginning of the video that I really wanted to analyze, and overall, the whole meaning of this video is tied to what Cam actually said. Run that back real quick.
And that's the power of media right now.
Right.
We don't have to wait for a publishing in a newspaper or a magazine. I can go direct to the source. I can go direct to the source. I can go direct to the source.
Cameron Newton is exactly right. Actually, he's 1,000% right. Nowadays, you can go directly to the source. Having these different platforms from podcasts all the way to different social media platforms, you can get it directly from the player, understanding what they do or even how they're feeling. It goes so deep to the point that players might be having negotiations for contracts with certain teams. And they'll make a simple tweet or even you following their social media. You might see that they unfollowed that team and you understand that they're probably frustrated or potentially they might be in trade talks. It comes up to the point where you see a player such as Cam Newton. He played with the Carolina Panthers. You see that he unfollows the Carolina Panthers. The next day you see that they release him. Little things like that show the power of social media, shows the power of everything in terms of technology and how it is completely different from the years prior. With that in mind, without further ado, let's get right into it. So today we will be highlighting new media versus the old media. Now, if you don't know what new media versus old media is, it's in the title. Basically, old media is back in the day, back in the 90s, early 2000s, even a little of the early 2010s. Now, social media was introduced in the early 2000s with things such as MySpace, Twitter was even out, and even Facebook, but they weren't as big and used as much as they are today. YouTube was created in 2005, which at this point was over 19 years ago, but looking at it, it was not as heavily used as it is today. To the point now a YouTube video would get more views in a day than an actual ESPN broadcast. I mean, looking at it from this standpoint, honestly, honestly, why would I tune into ESPN? Why would I tune into Fox Sports hearing about rumors and what people have heard about players when I can actually go to the source when they drop a video and talk about what happened from their perspective? I can even hop on Twitter, which is formerly now is known as X, or I can even go on Instagram, see a simple unfollow or maybe a story with one word post stating how they feel about the whole situation or about what happened. And I can kind of get context clues from what that player said and understand that they're frustrated with the organization and potentially want to leave. Now, the player we're about to cover right now is former NBA All-Star Latrell Sprewell. He played in the mid-90s and the early 2000s for a simple career. Actually was pretty decent in his career. Now, don't get me wrong. Latrell was a great player. He was an all-star. He was a beast. But the one thing that he's known about is choking out his coach. This right here is a 60-minute video. It's a segment that they used to hold back in the day to interview players, coaches. Without further ado, let's get right into this video.
Losing your nerve. In the case of Latrell Sprewell, it meant losing your cool and your job for choking your coach, PJ Carlesimo. But Sprewell says that's not what happened. Tonight, for the first time, the Golden State Warrior tells his side of the story.
Just a little context behind this video. The incident actually took place in December of 1997. This interview right here didn't happen until March of 1998. So for those 3 months of complete silence, people were making up assumptions. Different sports platforms were coming out with rumors, explaining what they heard from other players, what they heard from other people in general, and really didn't know how it was from Latrell Sprewell's point of view. So finally, March 9th of 1998, you finally heard from Latrell Sprewell's point of view of actually what happened in that incident.
Sprewell was fired by the Warriors and suspended for a year by the National Basketball Association. But last week, an arbitrator reduced the suspension and reinstated the 2 years and $16 million remaining on Sprewell's contract. He says the reason the arbitrator handed him such a victory is that the attack was not as brutal as everyone thought.
I wasn't choking PJ. I mean, PJ, he could breathe. It's not like he was losing air or anything like that. I mean, it wasn't a choke. I wasn't trying to kill PJ.
The interesting part about this is that we're getting this from his perspective, but we have to keep in the back of our minds that this might not even be true. Now, you're hearing different platforms, different sports platforms, different media, news outlets stating that Latrell Sprewell indeed choked out his coach. You heard rumors from different people who had inside sources within the teams. Maybe they talked to a teammate. Maybe they talked to somebody a part of the coaching staff. But there was no video proving that he actually choked his coach. So the thing is, we're going off of what he said. And this right here was an interview that had to be set up, but we don't know. It's interesting because we're previewing a segment that's going to happen later on in this video with a more recent occurrence of something that was similar. But the difference is you actually had film of what happened and you had footage, and the player really couldn't deny it because we seen it with our own eyes.
Well, we've seen the marks on his neck.
Well, I saw the two.
Yeah.
Those were the two little marks right there. Those were caused by my nails. I mean, I didn't. If you're choking someone, you don't get 2 scratches. You get a welt.
Latrell's explaining everything from his point of view. As I stated before, at the end of the day, without this film, without the evidence, we're going off of what he said. Before he even had his interview, we were going off of what these different news outlets and sport platforms were going through. Laura Varpio, author of Using Rhetorical Appeals to Credibility, Logic, and Emotions to Increase Your Persuasiveness, talked about using these different rhetorical appeals to overall increase your persuasiveness, meaning that you're trying to tell these people from your point of view what happened, and you're trying to persuade them that it is the truth overall. These writers and communicators use the different rhetorical appeals such as ethos, logos, pathos, and even at times kairos. Now, Latrell's using multiple different rhetorical appeals within this video. Now, obviously, he's using ethos, the flavor being personal experience. He's obviously the subject of the video, so therefore he's experienced what happened. He was there, so he can tell you exactly what happened. He's also using kairos. He's able to retort to the interviewer and clap back at any moment she has something to say.
Totally around your neck.
But didn't the team have to come and pull you off?
Well, they did.
You snapped, you lost it. You were out of control.
Well, I will say that, I was upset and I did lose control to a certain degree.
Now, right here, he's definitely using pathos, expression of anger or disgust is the flavor. He's explaining that he was angry, he was frustrated at the moment, and he's validating why he did, in fact, choke his coach. Now, he denied that he didn't actually choke him. He didn't want to kill him, but he did say that him and his coach did get into a little altercation, and he's going on and saying that, yeah, I was frustrated. That's how I was feeling. I did lose my cool a little bit, but it is what it is, and it is what it ain't.
But I didn't lose total control.
Your feeling as you look back is that you were not out of control, that you would have stopped? You would have stopped it at some point
Well,
if your teammates hadn't come over?
No one had been there. Yes, it's not like I was gonna sit there and kill the man. No, I would have stopped definitely. I was upset. We're all different people. Everybody isn't the same. You know, your personality is different than mine.
Now, Latrell saying this, he had an interesting point. You know, everybody's different. And with these new social media platforms, with these new different ways of connecting with the players, by seeing how they actually feel, we can see their different personalities. There's this one NBA player that actually has a podcast now. His name is Jeff Teague, and he was actually a quiet, reserved, laid-back player during his time. But since he's had his podcast, he's a hilarious guy, man. He tells his stories. He tells things that happen in the locker room. He's a funny person. A lot of people, including myself, now when we watch him say, where was all of this during the time that he played? He did play kind of in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and you know, social media wasn't as popping as it is now, but we actually see that he was a funny dude. He was a hilarious guy in the locker room, and we get to see his personality now that he actually has his own podcast.
I was with Atlanta. Danny Ferry hated me. I remember he came in the locker room one day and was like, I just really don't like you. I was like, damn, why? He was just like, I don't like how you walk. I don't like how you talk. I just don't like you. I was like, all right, I don't like you either. So I was going to be a restricted free agent. He wasn't going to offer me anything. I think he offered me like 4 years 16 or something just like crazy, and then gave Kyle like a 4 year 28. So I'm like, he really not messing with me. B. Jennings wanted to leave Milwaukee, so I was able to work my way in to get a deal with them done. So imagine calling your boss and just be able to tell him anything you ever wanted to say. Man, I told him everything I hated about him. I hate how tall you are. I hate your bald head. I hate everything about you. I hate how you talk. I hate how you walk. I told him everything I hated about him. He was like, all right, well, you have a good time. Good luck in Milwaukee. I signed a deal. Everybody in Milwaukee high five, and we like, yeah. We hit 12 o'clock. That's when the deal could be finalized. They send the paper over. He called me at 12:04 and was like, well, that's how we do business. We'll see you back in Atlanta next week.
Man, Jeff's hilarious, but back to Latrell.
I had been thrown out of practice for the second time. I almost felt like I'm the person that's being blamed for all of the losing. And, it was just so much going on that at that time, I think the frustration really built up.
If the coach had been black, would this whole thing have been completely different?
I don't think so. It was all about the respect factor with me. I mean, I think with PJ, his coaching style is such that, he likes to discipline and get on guys, and I'm saying we're men. It was about PJ disrespecting me as a man.
So we wondered for months what was going on and why Latrell did what he did and the whole altercation with his coach. So we find out in this interview that it was because he felt that he was being disrespected and wasn't being respected as a man, which is very understandable. But the difference, as we stated before, is that it took a while just to see what actually happened. But the next event we have took place in 2004, and it was a mess overall. So here you see former NBA All-Star, former NBA Defensive Player of the Year, Ron Artest. Now known as Metta World Peace, Ron Artest right here, you see his jersey is messed up. You see that he's getting escorted out, and he doesn't look very happy. So in 2004, November 19th, the Indiana Pacers went to Detroit to face the Detroit Pistons. Pacers actually had the game won and were up by 15 points at this moment. Detroit Pistons big man Ben Wallace would go up for a layup and get fouled hard by Ron Artest. Ben took exception to the foul, and then it was history after that. Let's roll the clip.
12, all 5 starters in double figures. And the Pacers have played a very intelligent game tonight. Then Wallace is fouled, and Wallace did. Wallace right at Artest. This has potential to be serious if they don't get between. Wallace upset. Players trying to hold each other off. Steven Jackson and Rasheed Wallace trying to be peacemakers. Now Jackson yelling. Wallace still going. You need the coaches in there to get him away. Jackson challenging Derek Coleman. Somebody should just get Jackson out of quickly as possible. The problem is, if Wallace is ejected, I'm not sure. He'd have to walk past the Pacer bench to go. Now Artest has jumped over the scorer's table and is trying to get down to the bench.
You see here after the fight, Ron Artest was chilling. He was actually laying down on the scorer's table trying to relax and calm down, but a beer proceeded to be thrown at him, and after that he proceeded to go into the stands and actually fight a fan. From there on, it was a complete mess. That's how the Malice in the Palace was born.
Artest is in the stands. Oh, this is awful. Fans are getting involved. Steven Jackson's in the fans. Rasheed Wallace going into the stands. The security trying to somehow restore order. Very dangerous. Fans are throwing cups with liquor shepherding them now onto the court. Chuck Person. The officials, I think they're going to call this game off, and that should be. The outcome is definitely decided. You have these ridiculous fans trying to go at the players and now throwing. Somebody could really get hurt.
Now, there's been new regulations for fans and different play calls that were implemented for players to avoid something like this happening once again. Now, it was crazy because, as stated before, the Pacers had the game in the bag. It was the end of the game, and obviously Ron Artest wasn't the one who started. He did give Ben Wallace a hard foul, who was probably already frustrated, but he did actually admit to why he was mad a little later, and that was 10, 15 years later he admitted why he was sad. So Ben Wallace admitted that he had a death in his family and was already frustrated, and at that point, the Pistons were losing the game by a lot, and he got fouled hard. So at that point, you kind of look at it and say, I don't blame him. Once again, that was coming from his standpoint, ethos, credibility to the speaker, experience overall. But the main subject of it all, Ron Artest, we did not get an interview from him, an official interview talking about everything that happened until 3 years later in 2007 when he was interviewed by this YouTube channel. As you see in the background of this video, Ron Artest is in a studio and he's being interviewed by producer Quincy Jones III. Funny to note, Ron Artest was actually a rapper on the side and actually made a diss song towards the actual commissioner at the time of the NBA, David Stern.
Hey, what player haters? David Stern. Damn, David Stern. I gotta teach you about the ghetto, some things you should learn.
With them officially coming out with a Netflix documentary over 15 years later with the actual players letting everybody know exactly what happened from their perspectives, Ron Artest has actually nowadays been on multiple podcasts explaining his point of view. But here's the interview with the producer, and this was 3 years after the event took place. Let's roll the clip.
Detroit's a gangster arena. Detroit is a gangster. Like, I don't think any other arena would have did that. If I could put myself in that guy's shoes who threw that cover at me, I'm just thinking like, I don't like this dude. I'm just gonna throw a beer at him. If I'm him, I had to be drunk to just throw a beer at somebody like me.
Now, just to add some context behind Ron Artest actually saying that, throwing the beer at somebody like me, Ron Artest is known as one of the toughest players in NBA history. Ron Artest is known as the type of guy that if you get into a bar fight, you want to have him by your side. He was also one of the strongest players. He actually had a story where he said he worked out, did a full-blown basketball practice with a 50-pound vest on. You got to understand how much that takes, how much power that takes, how much wit, determination, and overall a little craziness to be able to do that. But let's continue.
And sure enough, he was drunk. It's definitely not right. I definitely should have got a pass on that one. When I went in the stands, it wasn't okay. There's different ways to react. Nobody really thought about, that bear could have went into my eyes or whatever it was, which it did go in my eyes. Unfortunately, bear doesn't, it doesn't harm your eyes. You could just wipe it out. Fortunately, it could have did more damage than what it did. I could have probably got like a little cut in my eye. From the tip of the cup would have hit my eye, a little blood clot.
Now, author of Rhetorical Appeals of Vision, Jimmy Killingsworth, actually explained that the way rhetorical analysis now use the term appeals, meaning to plead or to please. In this case, Ron Artest is doing this. He's explaining to you that you got to look at it from my point of view. He threw the beer at me. It could have gotten my eyes. The beer, yes, that it wouldn't affect my vision really bad. But, the beer can could have hit me. It could have gave me a blood clot. It could have scratched my eye. It could have did some serious damage.
That was a possibility. I don't think any severe injuries, could have happened out of that beer being thrown at me. But it was very, very disrespectful. What Ben did was disrespectful. And if I would have known that the referees was going to handle it how they did, like as far as not handle the situation at all, then I would have probably fought. But they were supposed to eject him. They didn't eject him. And then the whole stadium, Detroit's a crazy arena. The owner of Detroit, he's a trip. He said, Ron Artest was on the if he wouldn't have been laying on the table, the guy would never threw the beer. That don't make sense because I lay on tables a lot. I lay on my bench in my neighborhood and nobody throws cups of beer or rocks at me. That just doesn't make sense. It was a horrible situation to be involved in. One guy was in the front row all day and calling me and Jermaine O'Neal mother hoes and bitches. He was saying that for the whole game. And you didn't see us attack him because those were just words. He was very disrespectful, and it was a kid. It was a man with his son, right there. They were sitting side by side. I don't think this guy was with them, but he was very disrespectful, just coming out his mouth, and all we did was play. The security didn't say nothing, but then, one guy threw some, at us. So I don't know, the old saying, that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. and you could just apply that beer at sticks and stones, and so I had to attack the sticks and stone thrower. But the guy who was saying the words is like, you can talk all day, but there's a line. People know that. People know what they should and shouldn't do.
As stated before, it took 3 years for that interview to happen and for you to understand everything that happened behind Ron Artest's perspective. But to give you some information regarding the whole incident, he did get suspended for a whole season without pay, as well as postseason play. So he missed a total of an NBA record, which is still a record today, 86 games. Now, the next player we actually introduced a little bit at the beginning of this video is Draymond Green. Draymond Green, in my opinion, is the face of new media because he kind of set a standard for a lot of players that a lot of them do now, and he kind of pioneered that whole trend being not only players with podcasts, but they're doing the podcast right after games, right after meetings, right after negotiations with contracts, etc. And what really made him famous within the podcast community is not only that he's a great player and a future Hall of Famer, but the fact that the Golden State Warriors, the team he's been on his whole career and is currently on still, were in the NBA Finals about 2 years ago, and literally after every single game, he posted a podcast episode actually analyzing and talking about the game. People kind of had mixed emotions about it because they asked themselves, is he really focused? Is this going to take him off focus? Apparently he was focused enough because the Golden State Warriors would end up winning the NBA Finals that year. Now, right after they won the 2022 NBA Finals, Dre actually got into something that TMZ recorded and actually had video evidence of him getting into a little scuffle with his teammate. That teammate being Jordan Poole. Now, it's important to mention that Draymond is known to kind of be out there. He's known to speak his mind. He's even actually gotten to altercations before, but he's never gotten to an actual altercation with his teammate, or it hasn't been recorded or even talked about in the media. But in this case, just like the other ones, it was recorded. Now, to go back to the Malice in the Palace, it was recorded, but this right here is something that kind of relates to the Latrell Sprewell incident. It relates in the sense that Latrell Sprewell's whole confrontation was just talked about by teammates or people outside sources that didn't really know what was going on. The same would have happened with Golden State Warriors, but now that we have so many cameras and different footage, we actually got footage. Somebody in the security team or one of the players or somebody actually ended up releasing the footage. The Malice in the Palace was different and will relate to another clip that we will have towards the end of the video because it was a live broadcast. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. TMZ paparazzi, something we like to see. Now, as you see right there, that's Draymond Green. Then they're going to point at Jordan Poole, which is the guy on the left. He's wearing a gray jersey. He's just chilling. So Draymond's sitting there chilling. You can look a little bit. He's chirping. Everybody knows that Draymond talks. But we about to get the bell ringing. Let's get it. Draymond's talking to Jordan Poole. He's walking towards him. He's kind of mad. He's kind of angry. Poole's just chilling. He's kind of ignoring him. But then Draymond gets right in his face. He pushes him, hits him with a two-piece. Boom, boom. Two-piece quick dinner. That was insane right there. We have not seen nothing like that from Draymond Green or the Golden State Warriors. Now, the crazy thing about it is, like I said before, nobody knows who released the footage. Even the Golden State Warriors GM came out and stated that he doesn't know who released the footage. But TMZ does pay a lot for people who give you footage of things that you want to see. So whoever did it got banked. But anyway, this is how Draymond responded.
I don't just hit people. Like, I've been in this league 11 years. I ain't just hit nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so dialogue, happens, and dialogue happens over the course of time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you usually ain't just triggered by something like that fast,
Right.
to that degree. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is a team. You know what I'm saying? Like, ain't nobody on my team triggering me, in an instant. And so dialogue, of course, happens over time. And, like I said, Cam's stuff wasn't accurate, but we know stuff that you don't say amongst men. You know what I'm saying? We know things that you have to stand on. And, I as I've admitted before, I was wrong in the way I handled it, for the situation where we were.
Keeping that in mind, that happened in 2022, so it wasn't that much long ago. Now, the next event that we're going to go into is still Draymond Green, and this happened November 14th of 2023, and actually happened during this actual season. Let's roll the clip.
Every team has an enforcer, and the Warriors have Draymond. The reason Draymond went so demonstrably is that Gobert had Clay in a headlock. Yeah. And Draymond's not feeling that at all. So he's just pulling him off. We're not doing that. This ain't that. Clay and McDaniels going at it here, and then all of a sudden Gobert comes in, and Draymond's like, no. Yeah, it's chill out. And then Draymond, he headlocked Gobert there. So, yeah, they're trying to get Draymond.
That right there was insane. Now, Draymond didn't go to his podcast immediately after this, but he was able to respond to the media instantly after the event happened, and this is how he responded.
I don't live my life with regrets. Like I said before, I'll come to a teammate's defense anytime that I'm in a position to come to a teammate's defense. That's what a team is. You stick together through the good and the bad. And I take that to heart. I take pride in being a good teammate.
Now, this is Dre using the rhetorical appeals to persuade you and convince you of his story, to explain to you why he did what he did. Now, right here, if you're looking at it like from an outsider's perspective, Draymond in a way is being hypocritical, because just a year prior, he choked out his teammate. And not to mention, after he choked out his teammate, the season was not the same. They came off of winning the championship. They did make the playoffs, but got eliminated in the second round instantly and weren't the same team. The chemistry wasn't there anymore. And his good teammate status that he prides himself to be on was not being shown during that time. And the player that he actually choked out ended up getting traded. And after that, it was history. So he did use the rhetorical appeals to kind of persuade you of how he's feeling. But Dre, at this point, is kind of full of,
No, that's when I step in here every single day. That's number one on my list, to be a good teammate. Number one. I think that takes care of a lot of things. So I take pride in that.
Shout out to Draymond, teammate of the year. But after this, he would end up getting suspended for a couple games. And then once he came back, after one game, he instantly gets into another brawl. Now, this brawl in particular was crazy because, to be honest, it wasn't really even a brawl. He just straight up socked a man. Let me show y'all and roll the clip.
Picked up his third foul. And now Green runs over Nurkic, and he'll be called for the foul. And they're going to take a look at this. Oh, man. I think this may be the last of Draymond Green. We'll see.
Draymond, what are you doing? You just straight up socked the dude. But anyways, it says indefinite suspension. They had him suspended for a couple weeks. But after the commissioner officially came up with a suspension and a punishment, he did end up getting suspended for about 16 games. Now, that's nothing compared to what other players have. That's nothing compared to Ron Artest and others in previous past. But after a while, you know, he kind of sat back. He went to therapy and actually talked about it on his podcast a couple weeks later after he did get reinstated, and talked about everything that went down.
I had a conversation with Adam Silver, commissioner of our league. I just told him, Adam, it's too much for me. Like, this is too much. It's all becoming too much for me.
There he goes, trying to persuade from his point of view how he feels. But Draymond, when we see you, if we didn't hear this podcast or anything, this is how we were viewing him at the time.
Green and James join.
Yeah, you can't throw the ball at people. Monk puts it up. And Curry's got the board. So that's it for Draymond Green. Got Rudy in a headlock. It's Draymond.
Somebody called for the foul, and they're going to take a look at this.
If you just seen these videos and never heard Draymond talk or actually see what he was saying from his point of view, you would just think, man, this guy is tough. This guy is overall crazy. But he did talk about everything that went down. He has his podcast, and he's not afraid to speak up and talk about what happened. But let's continue.
And I'm going to retire. And Adam said, you're making a very rash decision. And I won't let you do that. You know, we had a long, great conversation, very helpful to me, very thankful to play in a league with a commissioner like Adam.
We got an inside scoop of how the commissioner pretty much reacts. Now, as I stated before, this is all what Draymond is saying. That was what Latrell Sprewell was saying in the interview. That's what Ron Artest was saying in his interview. At the end of the day, we will not know the complete truth. We don't know, but we're going to believe and go off of what they're saying. Not necessarily believe, but we're going to listen and say, okay, from Draymond's perspective, this is what happened. This is how he felt. He goes into the meeting with the commissioner of the NBA, and this is what they talked about to resolve the issue of him putting his hands on other players, or really the players might have been antagonizing him, or he might have just been taking up for a teammate. He might have been a good teammate, even though we know that's kind of but we still hearing it from his point of view, which is very important, because back in the day, you had to get an interview just to hear it.
Who's more about helping you than hurting you, or helping you than punishing you, or, you know, he's more about the player.
In conclusion, we're fortunate because we are in a time now where we can actually get the perspective from the players. Anytime something happens, we get the inside scoop immediately. Shout out to Draymond Green because, as I stated before, he kind of pioneered all of this. Now, before there was sport podcasts, but he kind of made it to the point where he actually is talking in season. He's holding podcasts where he's interviewing people in season. You have different podcasts nowadays that pretty much do the same thing, but he was the starter of all of it. Yes, he's had crazy events. Yes, he's had suspensions and other things, but he's definitely set a trend that a lot are going to follow, and it's going to continue to get better and better as we go on with time. Now, with all of this, the important thing to note is that we do have these players' perspectives, and we can hear how they feel about the situation, but we have to keep in the back of our minds that they are using different rhetorical appeals, and they're going to persuade us as much as possible to believe whatever happened. Now, we look at it and say, hey, they're telling us a story, but you have to remember in the back of your mind that this is just another perspective. This is not just the media and rumors and what people are hearing. This is coming from the players and the source, but just because it is being said and just because it's happening doesn't necessarily mean it's true.